The nightmare in Florida homeowners insurance is the number one biggest domino, the biggest shoe to drop, if you will, to cause entire chaos through the Florida housing market. And this is a big time problem. I mean, if you have insurance now, you might be sitting back scratching your head saying, hey, what's the big deal? So I'm paying $8,000 a year for insurance and it used to be $2,000. I'm okay.
This is hideous. I'm paying $1,000 a month for increases to insurance. We're like, okay, we just might have to leave.
This was her insurance premium with Olympus 7 years ago, $1,897. It then went to $2,500 in 2020, more than $4,500 last year, and this year, $9,031.
Folks, it is an epic problem. It is forcing people out of their homes. What I am noticing now is that in Florida, our inventory levels are going up. They're much higher now than they've been at any point in this last 3 to 4 year run up. And I have to believe that part of the problem is that a lot of people just cannot afford to hold on to their homes any longer. But folks, how can a state that's only responsible for 9% of all of the US homeowner insurance claims be such an epic debacle in how much it costs? For sure, we get a hurricane every now and then, but we always have. So why has it been so bad and so devastating right now? In this quick update, I'm gonna give you a not too recent refresher on the history of Florida insurance. I'm gonna tell you exactly the culprits that have cost billions of dollars to all of us who pay into the insurance system here. But more importantly, I'm gonna, in a nonpartisan way, drill down on exactly what Ron DeSantis has or has not done for this debacle and talk about what risk you can expect if you own a home going into 2024, or you expect to buy and move and retire in the state of Florida like so many will in 24 and in 25 down the road. We're gonna cover all that and more on today's update. And as we smash through the update and the news, smash the like button, and as always, drop into the comments after and say hello. Let's get into the update.
With worries still rippling in Florida after Farmers Insurance announced it's dropping nearly 100,000 policies, conservative radio host Howie Carr asked Wednesday how DeSantis is handling things. The White House hopeful responded by saying recent reforms cutting incentives to sue insurers need more time to work, but predicted Florida would see relief.
It now is more economical for companies to come in. I think they're going to wait through this hurricane season. Knock on wood, we won't have a big storm this summer.
Now, the overarching problem with the insurance companies is they're all going out of business. Now, Jared, they're not all going out of business. I have this major brand company still. You're full of duty. No, here's the reality. Several insurance companies on an annual basis over the past 3 to 4 years, actually every year, go out of business in Florida, a big number of them. Now, on a given year, there's a roughly 40 carriers, maybe total. Now, let me give you an idea. The last 2 years, there were 6 or 7 companies each that went insolvent. Big time, big losses, okay? Ratchet that up. In the past year, you had the ratings agency, which rates insurance companies, downgrade a full 17. Nearly half of all the remaining insurers got downrated. Now, that's not a big deal, you might say, but the ratings actually allow an insurance company to be approved in order to be used by your mortgage insurance company. So your mortgage may be backed by a huge federal servicer like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, will require you have an A-rated insurance carrier, maybe for your own good and definitely to watch out for their own skin. And the reality is, if your insurance company gets downgraded, of which we had 17 out of 40 go down on top of 6 insolvent companies last year, boost that with the fact that nearly 30 of them were at risk for downgrade. 30 out of 40. Now, over the past year, many of you sit there and say, well, I have State Farm. Oh, guess what? State Farm doesn't carry insurance anymore. They're drawing down dramatically. The same with Progressive, the same with AAA. Like, most of the national firms for insurance aren't insuring in Florida at all. They won't. Or if anything, they're sending a whole lot of non-renewal notices to a whole lot of people who are getting dropped. But the hyperbolic statements that I might say, that people say, Jared, it's really not that bad. I don't like that you have Ron DeSantis on your thumbnail and you're talking about real estate crash. Listen to this. This is a big, big problem, because if you can't get insured, you can't have a mortgage. And if you can't have a mortgage, when your home is in the marketplace, it's only marketed to buyers who are paying cash. Cash buyers across the entire market represent 20 to 30%, depending on where you live, of all cash buying interest. And by the way, if you have to eliminate all mortgage and only sell to a cash purchaser, I assure you folks, you're going to take a big hit, most likely on the sale of that house. Not to mention that our insurance issues have taken what used to be a $2,000 a month bill back in 2019 all the way to $6,000 a month. Not to mention the massive anecdotal piles of news reports that we have personally, I have in the industry in the past year, heard people come up to me personally. I had a sale this year. Someone was paying $3,000 a month for a national brand company, went up to $14,000 for their annual policy in one single year. One jump, one notice. And that's nothing, folks. I've heard of people owning homes that had their policies bounced to over $30,000 annual a year, and rare indeed. But the point is, folks, there are many factors involved. So if you sit here and you just discounted what I just said, oh, I have insurance. Yeah, it's going up, but it's fine. I have a national. Baloney. Try putting your house on the market. If the insurance company has carried you for a minute, they might not give you too many hard times. But you go in and try and sell your house, then the new buyer calls into the marketplace to find an insurer for their house, to find that, oh, your house is too old. You're 15 years or older. You know what happens then? The insurance might take their insurance stethoscope, shove it right up your rectum, and make you do a full structural mechanical remodel in order for them to give you the good grace of an approval from their insurance company. And this is a fact. They might make you rewire your house. They might make you replumb it. They might make you rip the entire roof off for whatever because that 25-year roof is now 12 years old. I mean, it's crazy, folks, but this is what's going on. Never mind that you can find a litany of stories like the one I just described for you, where the cost of owning a home due to the insurance alone has become reason enough for someone to say, I throw in the towel, I can't afford my American dream in the paradise of Florida. Now, folks, as I mentioned, 6 out of 10 homeowners in Florida cannot do what's called going bare. Going bare, B-A-R-E, is now a headline going around Florida where people are now, as a movement, opting out of the insurance system altogether. The reason why this is such an epic problem is because as it stands, 60% have to have a policy to own their house. If you try and go bare, as they were, and unload your policy and self-insure yourself, and you have a mortgage policy, they could demand that your mortgage be called due. They could put you into foreclosure because you are not complying with the terms of your promissory note and agreements with the bank. They could force place insurance on your behalf. So they could go out and purchase insurance and say, you have to pay for it. And you go, I don't want to pay that insurance. Too bad. You're in default. You're going into foreclosure, pal. If you cannot get your home insured, you will lose 60 to 70% of the marketplace, devaluing your house. Bringing down the values in your neighborhood may have already happened where you live. You never know. By the way, in not too recent history, it used to cost twice as much than the rest of the country to insure a house here. If the rest of the country was $1,000, Florida was $2,000. Then in 2019, 2020, it was about 3 times as much in Florida to insure a house. And now it's nearly 4x, 400% higher. And folks, we're going to jump into the next important topic, which is where does the money go? So if we have 400% increase in the policies in Florida, who's getting rich off of all this money? Where is it all flowing? Let me give you a fascinating fact, folks. If you got to spend over $4,000 than the average American just to own a home in Florida, do you realize how much less in monthly mortgage payment that is for your house? That means that the buying power of the buyer coming in, remember, 60-70% of them have a mortgage. If they got to account to afford $6,000 of their yearly payment for your home, that's $100,000 less buying power. Just the difference between what the normal national person pays for insurance, the difference between what a Floridian has to pay, $100,000 less that a buyer in Florida can pay for your house because of all the extorted money, all the fraud, all the garbage that has absolutely run amok in Florida and has inflated the cost of insurance to the point where it costs us way more than anywhere else. In the commentary, I'm going to provide proof because the next thing that I want you to do, if you see anyone in the comments using terms like big insurance, governors are supporting big insurance, the laws in Florida are passed to help big insurance. So let's do deductive reasoning, right? Because the next thing is the reason why these policies are so high, $6,000 a month is a lot on average. Why shouldn't every insurance carrier flock to Florida? CNN covered and said, hey, look, most major brand insurance companies have left Florida. They've left California, by the way, for the same reasons. The laws there are similar to the laws we've had. However, Florida has been the complete wild, wild east for a few different industries that have absolutely committed so much fraud and heinous waste that it's absolutely fleeced all of us. Yes, there are hurricanes, but there's notable strings you can pull to understand who in the world has absolutely fleeced Florida homeowners by the billions. I'm going to point them out today on this channel. But here's one thing you need to understand. The opposite side of the spectrum is if all this money is being fleeced from us, how can two things be true? How can $6,000 be a record number per month going to the insurance companies? But then how can insurance companies at the same time be going out of business en masse, have so little money that they're downrated, meaning they are so undercapitalized, even by charging us record premiums, that they do not have money?
Gregory Buck is an insurance provider in Palm Beach County.
Since 2017, none of our companies who write homeowners in Florida have made any real money.
Folks, I'm going to give you receipts of exactly whose hands are in our pockets. But right now, I need you to let it resonate in your head that when we're paying so dang much, because most national brand insurance companies won't even come here. They won't even get in here. Okay, I can charge records amounts. So if it's such a juicy, big, fat pile of cash for insurance, why are they not all here? Why are they leaving? Why are they collapsing? Don't use big insurance in my comments. And if they do, call them out. If anyone uses the term big insurance, more than likely they're on the side of the parties who have been fleecing Floridians. So folks, while I think there's a time and place to really second guess insurance, there's been times where I've been uberly frustrated when I needed something to happen with insurance, didn't come to my aid. But here's the deal, folks. There is a complete reality. Two things can't be true. You can't be charging record sums and then the same companies that are charging them are going out of business. They have record low profits or no profits at all. They're going insolvent. And now all of a sudden you have the situation where it's known that you can't get national large brand insurance competition here. I can't shop several different insurance brands that are large. You're going to go into my comments, this reality about me, I can get that. I got that for my baloney. Great. You got one little fairy tale option on your brand new house, your high and dry area in the middle of a state that has very low fraud and the county was perfect. Like everything lined up for your little story. And so you're going to come in here and say this is the case, but this isn't true. Okay. We have national averages versus our state averages, and they're ridiculously offsetting one another. And you have the known facts of how many companies have gone out of business, and then a full 2/3 that exist downrated or threaten to be downrated because they're not well capitalized. They're not even charging us as much as they should to balance their own budget to make sure the state agencies and the ratings companies feel comfortable with their solvency, their ability to continue operating. 2020, people were paying $2,505 a year in the state of Florida. Then in 2021, $3,181. By 2022, it ballooned to an estimated $4,200. Now, obviously this year we're up to $6,000. Now, meanwhile, the failure of property insurers operating in Florida has seen state-backed property insurers of last resort, Citizens Insurance, ballooning in policy counts. So the reality is this: over 2021 to 2022, you had multiple things happening at the same time, particularly last year. Last year was absolute perfect storm, perfect recipe to cause crazy problems. Back in 2020, you go from a $2,500 a year average insurance, not terribly crazy. Obviously, we are one of the most storm-prone states in the country. We're going to be known to have a lot of property insurance issues and claims for that nature, but it absolutely got way worse recently. When did the whole catastrophe in insurance, when did it go from like, oh, that's getting kind of sketchy, nervous, to dangerously risky? Was between 2021 and 2022. And I'll tell you why. As we went from 21 to 22, remember what happened. Beyond the pandemic, you had all this liquidity coming in the marketplace. You had supply issues. People couldn't get materials to build houses. And then on top of that, materials and actual labor costs went through the roof. So remember, insurance is based on cost to replace something. So it didn't matter where the state was. If you were putting insurance on anything in the country, the sheer cost of replacement alone caused this process to get extremely expensive. Now fast forward to last fall in 2022, we had Hurricane Ian hit. Hurricane Ian exacerbated all of this. The headlines throughout 2022 really came to fruition, and it became full circle notice that a lot of these insurance companies aren't going to be hanging on for very long. As I mentioned earlier, in the big picture, if your mortgage is backed like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you have a down rating, you're done. You lose your insurance. Now, here still in 2023, insurance.com reported that Progressive, Farmers, and AAA have all announced plans to leave Florida or dramatically cut back on their policies. This is where you start hearing all the stories of people that say, I've got Progressive, I've got this, I've got that, and then all of a sudden, presto, you have a non-renewal notice in the mail. Geico and others at the start of 2023 have started to mention that they're going to start backing away from insuring houses in both Florida and California as well. Now, over the past 18 months, I mentioned a host of other insurance carriers that supposedly still insure houses here in Florida. They just upped their terms. They said, you know what? If all this scamming is going to go on, if you have an older roof, we're just not going to insure you. So they stopped saying yes to new policies. And that way they turn down a whole lot of people. And then people that actually have those roofs end up getting their policies jacked way up through the roof, or they end up getting a notice that, hey, sorry, as of this turn, you no longer have insurance with us. Now, folks, let me backtrack just for a moment, because in 2022, there were two major epic things that took place that I have to believe ended up lighting up Ron DeSantis in terms of his approach to saying, hey, look, we're now in serious trouble. Now, the insurance companies, all the newsmakers, everybody through 2021, 2022 got louder and louder. Like, this is crazy. But latch on to this, folks. You had a chunk of insurers completely go out of business last year. You had another chunk of insurers diminish all of their working business. Like, we're just not taking any more business. You had a chunk of insurers, as I mentioned, just discontinued people, raised their policies to the roof, or declined to extend them coverage altogether. You got that huge chunk that was narrowly solvent, but just got downrated by the ratings agency. So what happens next is no surprise. You had a huge glut of people jump on the state-backed policy. They had to go over to Citizens. So Citizens is taking on tons and tons of policies. So much so through the end of last year, went from 700,000 policies, I believe close to 1 million policies, maybe even beyond that number. But it was growing so fast that by March 2023, Ron DeSantis rocked the state of Florida by saying Citizens Insurance is liable to go insolvent if it's hit by a hurricane. Ron is saying, hey, we got an epic problem. You know, the reality was Citizens is layered in so many public safety nets, it can't literally be insolvent. But he was calling attention to another problem, which is the fact that Citizens is so overwhelmed. It's basically covering a huge slice of all Florida. And if we end up getting hit hard, it's going to be woefully short to cover all the costs. It will get really scary for the taxpayer. Nailed in the coffin number 2, big, massive signal of danger in the Florida market was the FIGA. Now, the FIGA is a state-run nonprofit corporation that provides assistance to Florida residents when their insurance companies become insolvent. Now, I'm going to flash a graph on the screen. You can see a history in this first graph of what we see as the open claims. Okay. Now you can see there's auto claims, which is the gold, which for some reason 2020 auto claims went through the roof. But for most of the years, the claims made to the FIGA for companies being in harm's way from insolvency isn't that big of a deal. When you consider what FIGA is the last bastion when the backstop of insurance for the typical Floridian has been overwhelmed. It's now gone into the backstop of the public safety net behind the insurance company, which great to know you have this. You probably didn't even know this existed. But let me show you this chart. Look at this chart of the return premium payments. Okay, this is the money paid out over the history of FIGA when they have to protect the common insured person for these deficiencies of insurance. Look at this. It went over $500 million in 2021 going into 2022. So 2022, in all likelihood, I do not know, couldn't describe for you exactly why this number went off the charts, but obviously you had the problems all at the same time. There were claims, particularly from Ian, but there were just so many other claims coming to the insurance company at the same time. Now, folks, that herein is what lies to the greater problem that we need to talk about is this. If we're paying $6,000 a month, and if it's not alone residing in the insurance profits, you know, we can all agree there's plenty of data that suggest that the money isn't just vanishing into the insurance company's CEO. Because if you think that way, you've lost the idea. What we need to identify next is who is the consumer who has cost us all of this money year after year. Where did it all go? And an even greater question to follow is, has the problem been fixed, or can we expect to pay $10,000 a year for insurance by 2025? Take out a pen. I'm going to tell you the 4 places that your money went to over the past few years. If your insurance went through the roof, here's why. Number 1, attorneys. Number 2, roofers. Number 3, general contractors. And number 4, your litigious neighbor. Of all the 50 states, which state would you guess has the most property insurance lawsuits in it? Now, if you're logical, you're going to do like me. You're going to be like, it's got to be a big state. Yeah. Maybe politically motivated in certain ways, right? Like, which states are bigger on legal reform, right? Because if you have tort reform, maybe it makes it harder and all this kind of stuff, right? So let's just kind of imagine which states it might be. And I would think most people would say California is first place. Got to be tons of lawsuits in California. Nope, you'd be wrong. Florida has 107,585 lawsuits on insurance in 2021. The other 49 states have 18% of all lawsuits. Florida has 81.25% of all the lawsuits on insurance are from our state. 80%, folks. And by the way, you might think that's because we have so many insurance claims, right? We only have 9% of all the country's insurance claims, yet we have 81% plus of all of the lawsuits. Now, the reason why that is the case is because Florida has one of the most lenient attorney fee processes in the states. Now, that was the case. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but the reality is you have to understand that in Florida, the money that attorneys can get from insurance companies is almost incidental. I say almost because there might be minor barriers of access. The nature of how our lawsuits work, you got to understand when it's so easy just to call up an attorney, like, hey, go after my insurance company. The insurance company knows, oh, it's Florida, it's coming from them, that the gate through to the money in the policy becomes very, very low. Here's how this works. If I have you and I'm covering your policy and all you have to do, ring to an attorney, you don't have to really cut them any money. They'll show up and got you, bro. Just sign up for me. They come after your insurance company and the pot is sitting there. And that pot already has a pre-agreed amount of capital in it. 100 grand for this item or 10 grand for that. And the attorney knows that's the pot of cash in that policy for this particular item. It's very, very easy to get. So folks, what this led to is that there was not a lot of requirements for people to get skin in the game to go after somebody. So that matters when you're talking lawsuits. If the attorney is like, all right, sign up. You don't have to pay me anything. I'll collect it out of them. Billboards for litigation. Oh my gosh. Like Dan Newland, all these guys, like our local guys, they're like famously billboarded up with how much money they're pulling out of the insurance companies. Their entire businesses run on it. Now, imagine that there's an entire industry that was super susceptible to being sued, right? So let's say that all of our grocery stores, let's name a brand, you could just walk in, do something. Oh, I twisted my leg in the parking lot. You could think of any reason to sue them. You could go to an attorney. They wouldn't require anything for you to get into the little legal battle. And then behind the grocery store was a big pile of money for you to actually access. And so no one really stopped or guarded that. And you could just keep doing it, right? Not you repetitively, but many people could go after the same grocery store because everybody knew there was a gateway to go into their insurance without high burden of proof, without high cost to invest to get the money, right? Because imagine there's a lot of ways that you go and sue somebody, like someone hurts you, harms you. You might have to pay your way into that lawsuit. But with insurance, that wasn't the case. It was very low. Nobody needed to come in with the cash because all the attorneys were in on the game. They all knew all we got to do is get them to sign retainer. You're done. You don't need to actually come in and pay me anything to go after these people. There's really not a ton of risk because I already know the money's sitting there. Let me take care of you. And all of this money became liquidated out through the attorneys. Billions and billions of dollars on a year after year basis. And many of those dollars did not actually trickle down to the actually insured person. In the season of time where inflation's really bad, groceries went up anyways. So the same grocery analogy is my groceries cost me $200 or $300 per family, but now they cost me $900 for my family, not just because the marketplace got more expensive for protein, but also because everybody's suing the insurance carrier behind the grocery store. But folks, fast forward 2022 and 2023. Ron DeSantis pushed many emergency sessions of Congress and tort reform was passed. And a lot of these loopholes were closed. Folks, I was very concerned about that because on the outside, I knew there was a huge debacle of insurance, but I didn't watch it that close. My outside view of Ron the pandemic, golden boy governor DeSantis I was very happy that he was my governor through the pandemic, okay? Wouldn't want to have lived anywhere else. But here I am in 2023 and I scratch my head as I see him on his campaign trail, much like the news are conflating it out to be, that Ron DeSantis turned his back on the state of Florida. But my real concern when I look at a politician is who are they? And I knew Ron DeSantis was an attorney. The fact that Ron DeSantis was an attorney and one of the 4 parties fleecing our insurance company are attorneys. My knee-jerk thought was he wasn't going to do anything to kneecap the access that insurance has into our pockets through the insurance scheme, which is evident. It is evident, folks, when you have 108,000 lawsuits and none of the other states are even more than 2,000 or 3,000 lawsuits. California, we're 30 times higher than California. But here's the deal. As we come into 2022, 2023, many of those loopholes with how the money flows, when you don't have to come in with skin in the game to go and sue your insurance company and just run straight to the pot and rate it, those aren't the case anymore. When it becomes an issue in a capitalistic society where the marketplace goes, I'm out of your state, I'm leaving because my grocery store is going to get sued by anybody and their brother, by whoever walks in, without any reasonable limitation of protection, you don't get groceries anymore in that area. So ultimately, we've had many insurers that seem to be a reverse trickling back, but it's going to take time. By the way, folks, I heard the weeks before the tort reform was set to pass, 300,000 lawsuits were filed. Insanity. Remember, I just showed you it was 107,000 filings in a single year on the residential side. I don't know if 300,000 was all residential. So you got to understand, folks, that's going to take time to shake through because we got to deal with that. The number 2 problem with insurance, roofers. So one of the biggest things that happened over the past 5 to 10 years in the state of Florida is roofers built entire businesses out of shaking down insurance companies. Now, listen, most insurance companies are going to say, oh no, it wasn't me. It was the out-of-state roofer. He came in and gave us all a bad name. Now, folks, listen, today, as I was shooting the video, I had a door knock today. Now, the house I'm living in is 8 years old. Yeah, 8 or 9 years old, something like that. By the way, most roofs in Florida are shingle roofs. They last 20 to 30 years. Depends on the storm issues. But I got this thing that says, no obligation, free inspection. It says right here, you may qualify for a new roof. Qualify for a new roof? Imagine if somebody walked up and gave you a flyer and said, hey, we're putting pools in the neighborhood, backyard, digging a hole in your yard, putting a pool in. Find out if you qualify for a new pool. Now, what does that mean? There's only one of 2 things, folks. Qualify means you can either buy a roof and insure it, or you can throw it in your insurance. Imagine that. So let me mention the next 2 parties that are guilty of running up the fraud on Florida insurance. If you're local, you already know this. You're yawning right now as I'm talking about roofers because you're like, yep, everybody I know used their insurance to scam their insurance to get a replacement roof on their house. The scam is very simple, but by the way, folks, you need to understand, I'm going to throw general contractors in right now, which by the way, if you go on YouTube and you search the bills that closed the lawsuit and contractor loopholes that frauded the insurance companies, you will find them ranting. So on YouTube, they're crying the blues over the bills that Ron DeSantis and the government just passed. And by the way, bipartisan, largely bipartisan support. There were more Dems than Republicans that disappeared from the support, but there were a few on both sides, okay? But mostly these reforms through insurance were bipartisan. But the reforms for Mr. Roofer and the general contractor is related to a massive fraud loophole called an AOB, or an assignment of benefits form. So what happens in Florida is that there would be a storm. There would be even a damage to your house. Like even the local contractors all like to blame the out-of-state guys, okay? So whenever we have our tradesmen talking about this, the roofers and the contractors, they'll talk about AOB fraud, which I'm going to describe for you right now. They describe it as those out-of-state dirty contractor fraudsters. It's like, no, it was actually all over the state. So it wasn't just those guys came in, storm chasers, they like to call them, as the fraudsters. Bull crap. I saw in my own home a local general contractor tried an AOB fraud scheme in my house. So this is crap that they're sitting there. Everybody's pissed because the laws have now removed this as well as the tort reform for attorneys. But here's what happens in the roofing and the GC side is there's a disaster or whatever. They come in, they have this form called assignment of benefits form. So they walk in, your house has got water flowing through it. And Mr. Water Begone guy, company man, walks in and says, they have a clipboard, right? They're like, we're going to get the drying machines out. We're going to start cutting out the drywall, make sure that you don't have mold, like just growing and overtaking this place. We're going to remediate. And then we're going to work with your insurance companies to get all this sorted out. Mr. Smith, sign right here. And so what they do is they have you sign like a little starting work order that says you can actually be on their premises, some kind of liability waiver. And then you'll go and you'll sign an AOB right there. Here's the benefits form that we got to work with your insurance company. What they don't tell you, and what happened in Florida over and over again, is the assignment of benefits form is a way for the insurance company to be instructed to give all the money billed straight to the contractor and leave the homeowner out of the process of payment. Now, why would you do that? Well, you can then call the adjuster over, right? So the contractor knows the insurance adjuster is coming over. They all, by the way, all the roofing guys, all the contractors by and large would meet the adjuster that was going to report the damage to the insurance company. And they would be there like, oh, you got to look at this, look at that, look at this, look at that, look at this. I got to do this. Oh, those floors are going to have to be gold because that was 24 karat. We got to replace that with like kind, da, 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 da. And then before you know it, there's this massive bill coming back. Well, then they're getting paid $100 grand, and then maybe they just put in 30,000 in material, right? So there's these scams going on where there would become deficient work. And the homeowner was basically praying that the GC or the roofer were honest people, right? Like, oh, they're going to get $100K out of the insurance company. I sure as heck hope that they put the right stuff and the right material in my house. And ultimately, they could do and charge whatever needed to be done with few oversights. And so what happened is lots and lots of money were extorted through the AOB method. And I saw it happen in my own house. Like a plumber flooded my own house, a local guy. They come in and they were literally like way late on cleaning up the mess. I'm like, you guys flooded my whole house. There's water under all of my floating floors. It was a mess. And then they come in and they're like, oh, they sent the person that came in with the tech to put the fans up was an expert at walking in with the clipboard. So over the years, they had people that were in these positions who were trained well, who knew how to take the owner through the path of filling out, completing these forms so that they can then extort money directly from the insurance companies. And obviously, a lot of lawsuits actually took place because these AOBs weren't actually being handled to finish the job. So, we did have issues where contractors would just not complete the work altogether. But just taking a quick look at the snapshot here of some of the laws that changed in 2022 and 2023. You have Senate Bill 2D signed by Governor DeSantis. Bill changes the impact of property insurance policyholders. 881 expands eligibility for a MySafe program. Bill 7052 contains provisions intended to increase consumer protections and insurer accountability. But ultimately, the major reforms, if you summarized it, a lot of it had to do with attorney lawsuits. So like, how do you pay an attorney? Like, if you're going to go into these lawsuits, then maybe there needs to be skin in the game. So the participants actually had to pay. There's also tightening in the reforms of how attorneys could calculate their fees. So it made it a little bit stricter in how they used multipliers to calculate how the attorney who was a prevailing party would win. There's also a little bit higher standards. Like, hey, look, you can go to court and you can try and sue somebody, but if you lose, if you're partially liable, right, you go sue your insurance company, but you yourself were part of the liability, you aren't going to be expecting that insurance company to pay for your suit of them. So there was a lot of different changes across tort reform that tightened up the fee nature, which the fee structure itself in Florida was so loose and super inviting to lawsuits. And again, the AOB feature, the assignment of benefits, that's one of the major fixtures that ended up getting changed. And as a result of AOB changes, you will not have such an access to AOB fraud. You're going to have the homeowner in the middle of the situation with the vendors. They can't just defraud them. I also heard that there's some changes, I believe, that were going to be made to advertising. There was a season where roofers were actually going around and marketing like, hey, look, your insurance company's going to buy you a new roof. And the homeowners know, like, hey, look, if you sue your insurance or if you push your roofer to replace your roof and you really don't need one, like people were just getting roofs put on. They just had dents in them or things of that nature. They didn't have like, hail damage, that is, in certain spots. But yet they could blow up the narrative enough where they would get a brand new $22,000 roof or $15,000 roof, whatever it was. They're not cheap. The insurance company's putting it on before it's time just because it gets sold that way by the roofing company. Folks, I told you there's 4 culprits in the beginning. There's attorneys, there's roofers, there's general contractors. We have to point out that it's also your fellow residents. Look at this. In Florida, 2021 lawsuits, look at column number 3. 1 lawsuit per 205 residents in Florida. Look at California. 1 lawsuit in almost 10,000 residences. In all reality, folks, we as neighbors cost our neighbors more money.
Forrest, the governor responding to those concerns today about this insurance crisis with what really sounded like a wish upon a star moment, that we don't get hit with a major hurricane. His critics seizing on the governor's comments tonight.
For everybody that got mad at me for putting Ron DeSantis on the thumbnail and thinking I'm a hater, Ron DeSantis, you just heard, taking heat around the clock. If you look around, the headlines are basically through this year of 2023 that Ron DeSantis has abandoned Florida. And I, for one, I wasn't super clued in on exactly how bad and when insurance got to the degree of crisis that it was. So, it's like frog in a pan of water. Like, I'm here, I live here, I watch it, but the reality is it's really gone crazy after 2020. So the Florida debacle of what it is now, epic proportions, really kind of spun out, really, year 3 of, life cycle as a governor here. But here's the deal. Look at the headlines. So this particular list here on Google, kind of the answer to Ron DeSantis and how he's done. Look at all the headlines. Let me zoom in on this right-wing rag called Mother Jones. Insurers gave Ron DeSantis millions. He made it harder to sue them. So the headline is that Ron DeSantis actually created tort reform. An attorney governor actually made it harder for his attorney friends to get really rich off the insurance system. This is insanity. This is like saying that Ron DeSantis flooded his neighbor's house with a water hose, but then they put the picture of the neighbor's house was actually on fire. They put that at the bottom of the article. Now, this Mother Jones article, which Mother Jones is a left-wing rag, there's a lot of those. Like, there's mainstreamers that really, they all echo the same thing. They pointed out that insurers gave Ron DeSantis a lot of money over several years, multiple millions of dollars, I think. Big insurance paid off Ron DeSantis over the years. Now, you got to understand, large insurance companies, a big one, might have given him 50, 100 grand. Single insurance company over so many years of his reelections and all that. But understand that they could have given it to the other guy, which if I remember, the other candidate that they could have mailed that to ended up in a Miami hotel room with a known male escort, according to that person's web history. And apparently either he was highly drunk or overdosed. There was lots of crystal meth and all. Okay, that was the other option. So for the heat, and again, I came into this not knowing if Ron DeSantis was a savior or a dud. And I mean that. I honestly, if Ron DeSantis had done nothing to the point of saving the insurance system, I would have come on and said it. But it is funny that you have this spin that he's made it harder for insurance to be sued. Well, that might be because we have 80% of the lawsuits happening in Florida. Maybe it should be curbed just a little. By the way, lest you still forget attorneys drove up the cost, get this. The insurance companies pushed for and won a number of reforms meant to curb what it saw as abuse. But so far, it hasn't changed the outlook for insurers, partly because a flood of nearly 300,000 lawsuits, the Insurance Information Institute said, was filed just before the law took place. Now, folks, That piece of information, again, I told you, 300,000 lawsuits filed right before he puts the wet blanket on the attorneys. That's from CNN. CNN themselves said, look, DeSantis tried to go at it. He tried to put a law. Right as he's passing a law, 300,000 lawsuits show up. But laws are like roots. And a lot of times you don't see the fruit of those laws over time. You're going to take some time to actually see the effects of them. But I will tell you, in 2024, I expect to see the insurance market continually making headlines of carriers coming back. That's going to be the first sign of good health. You're going to see a widening marketplace, not just everybody running to Citizens as a last resort, possibly making it dangerous for our state, but actually seeing more private money, more businesses getting involved in insuring Floridians, and ultimately bringing down the cost through a competitive environment that isn't overridden with danger to actually do business here. But ultimately, I believe it's probably going to be 2025 or 2026 before we see a softening in insurance prices. I do, however, think you might have seen a plateau. And knock on wood, we don't have a crazy storm in 2024. I think there's a really good chance that we plateau 2024 and see them tilting downward into 25 and into 26. But that's it for now, folks. If you've listened this far, thank you so much. Smash the like button, drop in the comments, say hello, say you hated it, say you loved it. And as always, if you want more great updates, particularly in real estate, with a slant and spending a lot of time in the Florida market, smash the subscribe button and follow us on this journey. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.